All right. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Conor Newman. I'm the Mayor's Liaison for the Allston Brighton neighborhood. Thank you for joining us. I'm here tonight to facilitate this statutorily required cannabis community outreach meeting. This is an application by Pure Oasis LLC for a retail recreational cannabis license to be operated at the address of 535 Washington Street in Brighton. Before we start, I'd like to go over my expectations for tonight's meeting. We've participated in multiple meetings of this kind, and I know this is a sensitive topic. Previously, I think a number of residents have already participated in a similar meeting for this same address with the same applicant. So I just want to make it clear that no decisions are being made here tonight, and no time will be acceptable to be disrespectful to anyone during the meeting. As Mike Ross can attest, I've had to kick people out before from other meetings, so we'll do so if we can't be respectful and be adults. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. There is no right or wrong opinion. We're here tonight to collect as many comments and questions for this proposal. I'm not here to facilitate a debate amongst residents or litigate state legislation. There's a chat function in the right-hand corner. It's there for folks to ask questions they don't feel comfortable raising their hand. It's not there to function as a debate. This is not Facebook. This is not social media. If I see a debate going on amongst residents, I will eject you. I will ask that all questions be directed towards the applicant and myself only. And the applicant will answer all questions related to their proposal to the best of their ability, and I will answer questions specific to the city's process. If I am unable or the applicant's unable to answer a question tonight, we'll follow up with you after the meeting to get you that information. This is an open comment period, meaning that if you do not get called on tonight, or if you think of a question that has not been answered after the meeting is concluded, all you need to do is reach out to the mayor's office and we'll work to get you that information. My contact information has been included on the flyer you received attending this meeting. I can also provide that information again. So just want to stress that open comment period. At this time, the applicant does not have a scheduled hearing date with the Boston Cannabis Board. Our office will be collecting comments up until that hearing date. And in the event that they are approved and they go on to the Zoning Board of Appeals, we will continue to collect comments as well, forwarding those to the relative, to the related bodies that will make the determination on whether or not to grant this license. So I think I've talked for enough there. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you and have someone share their screen. We'll launch into the presentation. Then afterwards, we'll have ample time to get into questions and comments from the community. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Connor. In this case, very proud to turn the heavy lifting over to our principal, Kobe Evans, who is the person who would actually be operating this facility. So you'll be hearing from me maybe if there's some questions or some topics that come up. Kobe, I have the presentation if you need me to open it, but you probably have it on your computer. If you want to take it over, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so Connor, if you give me permission, I'll share my screen.
You should already have permission, but hold on.
Yeah, I see a share button, but it doesn't look like it's activated.
Yeah, mine's grayed out too, Connor.
Privileges.
There you go.
Anything work there?
Yep, I got it.
Excellent.
Give me a second just to find this file. Can you guys see that?
Yes. Kevin Hart's a part of your team, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll upgrade him to panelist.
Is it possible that the screen is vertical?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was sharing, but then something happened and it went away.
Or is that just my computer?
No, it's mine as well.
I'm also seeing it vertical as well.
Let me try to pull it up.
Mike, are you seeing it
I'm
loading?
seeing vertical, yeah. I'm willing to pull it up here on my screen to see if that works.
Yeah, try on yours, Mike. I'm not sure why it's not loading
All
for
right,
me.
you'll pull yours down.
Yeah. Connor, can you switch over
I
permission?
I have the ability. I don't think he has to do anything. Let me. I think you have to stop your sharing though. All right, folks.
Yeah.
Because it's just letting me share a file. It's not letting me share my
Yeah, that's what
screen.
I had to do. I had to go in and find the file. It wasn't straightforward, and then
Oh, and you saved it to your laptop or something?
I saved it on my desktop, and then when I loaded it, it came up in this funky
Yeah.
animation.
Connor, is there any other way to let us share our screen, or does it just let us share the file?
Yeah,
You should be able to share up top. It should be share my screen, Control Shift D.
yeah, it says share a file, but usually you'll show me different windows that I could possibly share, and this one it just gives me.
Yeah, the share my screen is grayed out. It says you can share a file or you can share my screen,
Yeah,
but
you're
I'm
right.
also
You're right.
All right, let me try something here.
Yeah, it's sharing files, but not the screen.
I've never seen this before, and I've seen everything.
Yeah, I can always do it on my end as well too. Um,
Yeah, but you don't. I don't think you don't have to file. Yeah,
I can send it to you.
I should have a copy, but if you want to,
yeah. If you could activate the share my screen function, that would suffice.
Connor, I'm also going to send this to you.
right.
It's a big file though.
So Kobe, I'm going to make you a presenter here.
Okay.
See if that works.
Okay, that did it.
Hallelujah. There you go.
Okay, guys. Sorry for the delay. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Kobe Evans. I'm here with our attorney, Mike Ross, and my business partner, Kevin Hart. For most of the people on this presentation, this is our second go round. One of the things that we took away from the last presentation is that the community had a lot of concerns regarding traffic and parking. So what we've done is revised our proposal. We hired an independent traffic engineer who did not only a traffic study, but they also did a parking study. And that engineer is Jeff Bandini, and he is here from McMahon and Associates, and he'll be doing part of this presentation. Since we're doing this for a second time, a lot of it is obligatory for state and local regulations. And so we're not going to spend too much time on the actual presentation that we've done before. But what I have done is in the chat, you will find my email address. And if you have any questions, any follow-up questions, any individual specific questions, I am available after this presentation to answer any specific questions regarding our proposal. But for now, I'm just going to go through and give a high-level presentation. I want to save most of the time in our presentation for feedback from community members, but more so give Jeff an opportunity to present his findings regarding traffic and parking. So with that being said, Kevin and I, we own Pure Oasis. We're Boston's first recreational cannabis dispensary. We've been open since March of 2020, going on 2 years. In the cannabis industry, because it's so busy, time is almost measured in dog years. So 2 years in operation is probably more synonymous with maybe 5 years or so. We opened in 2020. We've been, kind of immersed in our business for the last 2 years. To that end, you'll notice down in this part of the presentation for 2020 and 2021, we won Boston Magazine's Best Pot Shop in Boston. The proposed site, as many of you know, is the old Swan Dry Cleaners. It's been closed for a couple of years. Kevin and I purchased it last year, so we are the owners of that building now. And so again, Swan Cleaners was in business for over 30 years as a dry cleaners. And so now we own it, and we are looking to just change the whole facade of the neighborhood and add a new business to that site. This is just a rendering of what the site is looking like now, what it will potentially look like in the future, an exterior shot of the building, and also an interior shot of just a rendering of what our vision of the new site will look like. This is just an overhead kind of surface level view of the design elements of the shop in terms of coming in and going out. We're still working through some of the design elements. More pictures. I think that part of the feedback that we got from one of the earlier meetings is that people wanted to see more pictures of what the finished design will look like. And so to that end, we wanted to present more and share more with the community. Again, just diving into feedback from the community, we hired an independent company to conduct a traffic study, and what we'll be doing to address traffic issues is providing off-street parking for employees. In the back of the site, there are a couple of parking spaces where we weren't going to use those for off-street employee parking, but now going forward, those will be available for employee parking. And then also we have secured some additional off-street employee parking on Fairbank Street. We also have reduced the operating hours. Before, I think we were looking at 10 to 10, reducing that nighttime load from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then also just, Kevin and I have been out in the community, as you guys know, the last few weeks, talking to residents, emailing, walking the neighborhoods, talking to people, doing more outreach and really hearing from people in terms of what their concerns are. At this point, we're going to do two things. One, I'm going to bring in Jeff, and he's going to talk about his presentation. And then on the other end of his presentation, we have a little more information about the proposed site. So Jeff, whenever you're ready, and then you can just give me a cue and I'll scroll through the presentation for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kobe. Again, Jeff Bandini with McMahon Associates. So we were brought in from Pure Oasis to conduct both a parking and traffic study to demonstrate sort of the impact of the proposed development on the surrounding neighborhood. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, and Kobe had done this already, just pointing out the site location in the context of the surrounding neighborhood. So we would retrofit the former dry cleaning building. The proposed dispensary is a little under 4,000 overall square feet. And Kobe did mention the full access driveway on the rear of the site that would provide access for employee parking so that those vehicles would not be subjected to parking on the street. Next slide, please. So basically, we did our traffic study to demonstrate the proposed impact of the study, of the proposed development on the study. And what we did was look at the trip generation from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is a national organization that compiles a list of different uses and the number of trips generated with those proposed uses based on independent variables, whether that be size of the facility or square footage or things like that. So ITE has what they call a land use code that indicates how many trips would be generated by a proposed marijuana dispensary based on the square footage. And what you see in front of you is the number of, just the methodology. We looked at the peak hour of the proposed facility and put that in terms of like what that size would demonstrate in terms of the overall impact. And that would be, during the weekday afternoon peak period when it's anticipated that the proposed number of trips to the site would be greatest. And so what that gave us is the amount of trips to and from the site would be about 50 vehicles during, again, that highest peak hour. Next slide, Kobe. So there's this area of Brighton benefits from excellent multimodal and public transportation use. There are 2 MBTA bus stops that run basically right in front of the site along Washington Street. Bus Route 57 has a stop directly, 450 feet, west of the site. And Route 501 has a bus stop directly across the street. And, what I'll demonstrate a little bit later is that there's certainly, enhanced access for multimodal approaches, be it bicycles or pedestrians as well, that have the ability to access the site beyond just the normal, driving to the site, finding a parking space and walking in. So, based on the composition of the study area, that's gives a multimodal approach to this site and not just single occupancy vehicles either. Next slide, Kobe. So I did mention this. So here's just a map of I mentioned the MBTA transit stop across the street that's located in the little T insignia there. As part of our site visit, we looked at the amount of unrestricted parking in the study area. And there is also a bicycle facility along Washington Street that provides that ability for bicycles to access the site without having to, fight with the adjacent vehicle traffic. They have their own lane so they can travel to the site. And again, this all kind of speaks to the composition of the study area and how we anticipate that not every patron that visits the site will be a unique single occupancy vehicle. Next slide, please. So I did kind of mention that already. So the U.S. Census Bureau puts out what we call mode split data for different cities and towns and communities. And for Brighton, what we found was that about 50% of the vehicles that travel to retail trips do so by vehicle. And that other 50% is comprised of transit operations, and then 14% of it is bicycle or walk trips. So essentially what we did was we put this into our level of thinking in terms of how many vehicles would be accessing the site, and then in turn turn that into how many vehicles we anticipate would need parking at the site as well. Next slide. So this is just how we kind of rolled all this information into our parking evaluation summary. Again, I talked about the ITE trip generation and then that mode split. So essentially the ITE indicates it'd be 50 vehicle trips during the peak hour. That mode split indicates 50% of those would be vehicle trips. So we come out to about 25 unique vehicle trips per hour. And essentially what that indicates is that there would be, because of the service rate of the expectation of the business, that would mean approximately 8 minutes per customer. So your service rate of the vehicles that are actually driving to the site is less than 30 minutes. So in so doing, those 25 vehicle trips per hour would translate to about less than 13 vehicle parking spaces required during that peak hour. And I should also mention too that what ITE considers as part of the trip generation, it only really considers unique trips to the site. For ITE Land Use Code 882, it does not take into account the number of trips that are traveling along Washington Street that may just decide to stop in to the proposed facility and patronize the site. What essentially what that means is that the amount of impact on Washington Street and the neighboring study area would actually be significantly less, because there would be some expectation that vehicles traveling along Washington Street would see the development and decide to stop in, either on their way home or on their way home from work or to other errands. So that would not necessarily translate to a net increase in traffic volume to the proposed study area. Next slide, please. So in order to kind of examine the amount of capacity that we would need in terms of the available parking, we performed a parking utilization study on Thursday, December 16th from 5 to 6:30. And you can kind of see a little bit, the proposed site is located right in the middle of this graphic here, right on the corner of Fairbanks and across the street from Langley. So what we did was we scoped our study area based on about a 5-minute walk along Washington Street, about 700 feet. We established that basically the amount of walking distance that somebody would feel comfortable walking to the site. Again, we cut it off a little to the east, west of the Lake Street, Brock Street intersection. And then some of the residential roadways a little to the north, probably about 100 feet. We didn't want to scope our study area too far into the local residences because we understand that, Washington Street is comprised of commercial uses where, patrons are more likely to park along Washington Street than necessarily the adjacent neighborhood. So when we examined the study area, we found that there's 157 on-street parking spaces, and we split our 90-minute parking utilization study into 15-minute increments and established what that highest 15-minute interval would be within the 90 minutes, and found that to be that the highest utilization occurred during 6 to 6:15 p.m., and that during that time there were 33 parking spaces available that we would anticipate would be used by folks that would be patronizing the proposed Pure Oasis facility. And so those 33 parking spaces would provide adequate capacity to the amount of parking that we established that we would need based on the ITE trip generation, the mode split data for Brighton, the anticipation that some of the vehicles would be traveling via bike, pedestrian, and transit. And also that doesn't account for vehicles that would be, driving on Washington Street that would decide to stop on the way home. So that all kind of goes into the conservative estimate of the unique amount of vehicle trips that we anticipate on the site. Next slide, Kobe. So this examines our, just a piece of our traffic analysis in terms of the overall impact on delay and, additional traffic volume that we expect on Washington Street. So we performed a traffic count at the intersection of Washington at Fairbanks and Langley, and we ran a synchro capacity analysis based on the Highway Capacity Manual, which is put together by the Transportation Research Board. It's, the widely accepted transportation analysis tool that we have at our disposal to measure delay within a study area. So we examined traffic counts at that intersection, and we looked at the existing conditions, the no-build conditions if this intersection were to not see any sort of expansion, and also and then added in the proposed trips based on the methodology that I outlined, and found that the intersection delay at this location would increase by only about 1.3 seconds during the PM peak, which is the highest peak hour that we anticipate. So what does that look like in terms of overall increase in traffic volumes on Washington Street? So it's about 11,500 vehicles a day now. With the Pure Oasis, we anticipate about a little less than 12,000. So that's about an increase of about 400 trips per day. So that's approximately a 4% increase. And I think what Kobe mentioned in the first couple slides is important as well, when he demonstrated, that the dry cleaners was in operation, for about 30 years. And obviously that dry cleaner has an impact associated with it, especially when you consider the amount of, each dry cleaning trip is, a drop off, say in the morning, and that's, one vehicle entering and exiting. And then if it's a vehicle pickup in the afternoon, it's another vehicle that's entering and exiting the study area. And because of the composition of the use for dry cleaners, a lot of patrons for dry cleaners aren't necessarily subjected to that mode split because, patrons of dry cleaners don't necessarily, use the bus or, bike to the site or walk down the street with their, loads of laundry. So that sort of use is a little bit more associated with a single vehicle occupancy use, whereas something like a cannabis facility is not necessarily associated with that. There are other ways of traveling to the site, as I mentioned, given the, availability of other modes of transit to the site. So just from a pure comparative standpoint, we understand that, the dry cleaner did have traffic associated with it. And overall, the impact that we've demonstrated, the cannabis would have, less of an impact overall. And next slide, please. I believe that may have been the last slide that contains some sort of methodology. So this is just conclusions based on the bike walk transit, which I mentioned. The parking study indicated there's 33 available spaces during the highest peak hour. The mode split that we anticipate would indicate there would be 13 parking spaces needed, all within a 5-minute walk, and just outline some of the traffic engineering methodology about the no significant increase in volume of delay along Washington Street or at the intersection of Fairbanks and Langley. So that's the presentation that McMahon had come up with for the traffic and parking, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the conclusion of this presentation.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Kobe.
In addition to doing an analysis of the existing parking conditions, we also have secured some additional off-site parking. We're going to use the space that we have at the dispensary for a little bit of staff parking for 2 cars, and then there is some additional parking off Fairbanks Street for overflow satellite parking for staff. This is one of the aspects of Pure Oasis being at this location, is that because of the other approved dispensary down on Market Street, it creates a buffer zone, and it just about buffers out Brighton Center. Overall, just talking about operations and community collaborations, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is being a good community partner in our existing location in Dorchester. For Brighton, again, we're looking at reducing our hours from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. So far, we've gathered over 200 letters of support, and we are continuing to do more outreach as these weeks go forward. In terms of operations, there's only a few people that have actually been in operation for a cannabis dispensary in Boston, Pure Oasis being one of them. With that, again, it's almost dog years when it comes to cannabis operations. In those 2 years, we have learned immensely in terms of what it takes to be a responsible owner of this business, and we're looking to employ that in Brighton at our next location. Security is key. Building up Dorchester as well as this location, we lean on our security consultant who formerly worked for Boston Police Department, Dan Linsky, and Dan and his team at Kroll have been our partners in developing safety plans as well as security plans that work directly with Boston Police Department so that they are dialed into our camera systems and panic buttons. And so if there's ever an emergency, we have that existing partnership, and the responsiveness is existing. Loitering is a big issue for us, but surprisingly, we don't have any loitering issues over in Dorchester. We thought that would be a big issue, but I think that people think of loitering as it relates to maybe a liquor store. But what we found is we try and, engage our customers, but our customers want to get in quickly, purchase what they are looking to purchase, and get out as quickly as possible. So loitering is a non-issue, and we have that experience to speak to that. Diversion is a big key in terms of any of our product getting into the hands of someone under 21. We're hypersensitive about those issues, and we have security inside and outside. I think one of the things that we have yet to mention in terms of dealing with parking is that we know how to have a good security presence in our existing location, and we are going to replicate that in Brighton to deal with any people that might be double parking. If we find that you are, one of the things we do in Dorchester is that our staff is trained that if they see someone parking illegally, they cannot enter the store until they park in a safe designated parking area. And so we're going to employ that in Brighton as well, as that we'll have extra security staff on the street during those busy times and other times, just to make sure that none of our customers are causing any parking issues by double parking or any illegal parking in driveways, private property, things of that nature. We hire from the community. That's a big goal of ours, and it's something that we do strive towards, and we have been successful in achieving that. What we found in this industry is that when we hire from the community, it does a couple of things. And as it relates to Brighton, one of the good things is that people aren't driving to work, they're biking to work, they're taking the bus, the Uber, or walking. And so we really have a strong emphasis on hiring local. Um, and then just working with the city, based on our experience in opening up Grove Hall in Dorchester, we had such a great relationship with our partners in the city of Boston, is that we wanted to stay within the city for our next location. And again, in the community, in the bigger part of the city, we've demonstrated that we've had no issues in 2 years since we've been open. We've been good community partners, we've been good municipal partners, and we want to use that momentum to stay within the community that we call home and open our next dispensary. Kevin and I have some very strong lived experience as it relates to kind of the war on drugs and dealing with socioeconomic issues around the city, around the economy, around having jobs that create long-lasting financial empowerment, as well as economic empowerment and social justice. And we partnered with people like Ayanna Presley when we first opened up, and she was a big supporter of ours, and she is to this day. And we hold true to that, and we have a responsibility to pay that stuff forward. And again, it just goes back to experience. I think a lot of people they propose things and they don't have a good plan because they don't have the experience that goes along with it. But there's only a couple of people that have been doing this in Boston, for a number of years. And Kevin and I feel very comfortable that when we say something, we stand behind it because we have the experience of knowing how things play out, and we can, kind of project what the future will be like in a location like Brighton. That wraps up our part of the presentation. What we'd like to do is to open up to community constituents to hear from you guys in terms of your concerns and, see how we can better shape this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. Just want to quickly recognize we have some representatives from different elected officials' offices. We have Alex from State Rep Kevin Honen's office, Pam Mullaney from Councilor Braden's office, and then Jen Migliori from State Rep Mike Moran's office. So just want to give a second to recognize them. So folks, you can digitally raise your hand. If you look below, there should be the option. It should be a smiley face with a plus sign. You can digitally raise your hand. I know we have a number of people who are calling in via phone. You can also hit *3, and that will also digitally raise your hand. And I can also know that you have a question or comment. Just remind folks, please be respectful, and comments should be directed either to myself regarding the city process or to the applicant. I don't want to host a debate. Before I start calling on people, though, there were a couple of questions in the Q&A. Specifically, one resident was asking, just pull it up here. So you referenced during the traffic study the highest peak hour. He just wanted to confirm which hour was that? Was that 5 to 6 p.m.? Was that 6 to 7 p.m.? If you could just clarify. And then also, I believe you already answered this, but was parking utilization also viewed on Langley Road, being one of the closer streets?
So on the parking utilization, that was primarily on Washington Street, I believe, and Jeff can correct me, but Washington Street generally has the most inventory of parking, and it's the easiest to access. And again, the locations would be on Washington Street. People drive up and down Washington Street, and for the most part, that is where the inventory is. And then the peak hours, I believe, was Jeff, 5 to 6:30.
So we looked at the peak hour of the, a typical peak hour for parking in this area is 5 to 6:30. So we wanted to make sure that we had a 90-minute window so that we could, again, determine what that peak 15-minute period was, so that we compare that with the amount of parking that we included on the site. So the overall peak hour, like the singular peak hour, was from 5 to 6, but the actual 15-minute peak occurred from 6 to 6:15.
Okay. Similar parking question that also came in. A resident mentioned that, often with food delivery services, there's drivers that tend to be double parked on the main road. Will you guys be looking at deliveries?
No, not at that location.
Okay.
Well, like, can you clarify, like,
I think they meant like, cannabis delivery services, like
yeah, so that particular location has a driveway in the back that we can take deliveries through the driveway off street.
Okay, but you guys wouldn't be fulfilling orders for delivery that a delivery drive would be. Okay,
No.
great. All right, we have a bunch of hands raised, so I want to start chipping away at those, and then I'll also circle back to the chat function as well and the Q&A. So, first up, Will, I saw your hand raised, and then your hand wasn't raised. So, Will, I'm just going to mute you right now if you want to go ahead.
Oh, Bill Shuker.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Bill Shuker. I have a lot of questions and a lot of comments to make. First off, I'm state my opposition to this. And listening to the presentation about traffic was kind of interesting to me, but I'll kind of address that. I've owned the building at 539 for 30 years now. And I live there now, and I have tenants. And I'm actually pretty amazed that you would consider putting an establishment like this right next to a house and in a mostly residential neighborhood. The parking is tight already. I heard and I listened to the traffic studies, a lot of numbers that were pretty technical in many ways, but I've seen the traffic there for 30 years and I know how tight it is. One of the things you mentioned was, well, there was a dry cleaner there and that had parking. Well, they had a reserved strip right on Washington Street where for people to pull up, drop off their clothes, pick them up and leave. If you haven't seen how busy that gets during peak hours, I just don't know how you'll have to see it. You say your peak is like from 5 to 6. A lot of people who live in that neighborhood drive to work and they're coming home at that time and they're looking for parking spots. And they don't necessarily look on Washington Street. They do there, but they also look on the side streets. And your parking for your establishment is going to go up Fairbanks Street, and it's make it very, very hard to park there. A big issue I have is who's going to be coming into the neighborhood. I looked at Yelp for your Dorchester site. I visited your Dorchester site. I looked at reviews on Yelp, and the reviews were from all over the place. I think there were 35 reviews, and 23 of them were from out of state or out of area. And the remaining 10 or 12, they just said Boston. So there was nobody from Dorchester who was reviewing your store. But seeing that there were 23 people, even somebody from Spain reviewed it. So we're bringing a lot of people into this neighborhood who normally wouldn't be there. And that's, of course, going to take up the traffic spots and everything. And that's going to hurt the businesses that are there, the little businesses, the mom and pop stuff. The size of this dry cleaners is enormous, 4,000 square feet. We're not talking a small storefront. We're talking a huge store. And I think that you're underestimating the numbers of people who are going to come there. Going back to the fact that my house is right next door, you're mandated to have lights, cameras, security people. You just mentioned you're going to have people out directing traffic now. This is already a safe neighborhood. There was a comment someplace saying that establishments like this have a tendency to make an area safer. Well, we're already very safe. Okay. Having my house right next door now with bright security lights, lots of action, lots of guards, it's going to create a very active environment that I think is going to unnerve a lot of tenants that I have and potential tenants who may not necessarily want to live next to an establishment like this. I think it's going to change the tenor of a very quiet, residential, calm, safe area into something that's very, very active, very congested, very hard to park in. If you go there from 4:30 to 6:30, most days during rush hour, which you call your peak hours, the traffic is backed up from Brighton Center to Oak Square Center. Okay. And those are your peak hours. So just imagine now you're going to have people who are going to want to make U-turns. We're going to try to find parking spots. We're going to back into parking spots. It's going to be a mess. And finally, I want to address that parking for your employees in the back. On the overlay you had a rectangle marking the parking area. Well, you included my property back there. Now that narrow path going back in there, that narrow driveway there, I believe you're going to use that to get to parking by a fellow's lot back there. It's very narrow. It's very hard to get in and out. You can't get one car in while one car is coming out. Years ago, when it was a dirt road, I went around to the neighbors to say, can we pave this? And who ended up paying for paving it? I did, and my brother did, and one other person. The gentleman whose lot it is refused to go along with us to pave it. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I'll close up by saying exactly everything that I said. My building is right next to yours. There's an alleyway between it, 30 inches wide. I can reach out my window, touch your building. You're going to have higher security because the state mandates it, because they know these are risky endeavors. And I will close with that. I am opposed to this. I am the closest to butter, and I'm very concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next, we'll go to Barbara Hannigan, and then I'll call on Farah after that. And folks, after I've called on you, could you please lower your hands? That way I can keep track of who has been selected and who hasn't been selected.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Will. All right, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara Hannigan. Thank you, Conor. The last time I opposed this, Kobe, I know that you sent me an email. We've had some correspondence. I'm still opposing it. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Brandini, I apologize. You said that you did your study on December 16th. Is that correct?
Yes, excuse me.
Okay. And so first of all, let me point out that December 16th, a lot of the traffic that we have comes from not only, as my neighbor just articulated, but we have a large student population. And I suspect that on December 16th, a lot of the students have gone home for short-term vacation at that time. So it's possible, although again, as my neighbor said, I didn't understand a lot of the numbers that you talked about, but on any given day, you can come here and you'll see that the traffic is backed up from Brighton Center well past Oak Square. I'm not going to get into the traffic and the parking. I have sent a letter to the Cannabis board and stating my opposition, but I want to talk about the danger in this area. On the multimodal accessibility picture that you showed, you actually show the bend in the road that is almost right in front of 535 Washington Street. And I don't know, Mr. Bandini, if when you were doing your traffic study, if you looked at how many accidents, car accidents, that have happened in front of 535 Washington Street. In fact, just this past Saturday, February 12th at approximately 2:30, there was a 3-car accident there. The Boston police were there, so I'm sure there is a report. Oftentimes there are accidents there and the police don't come because they're fender benders. I've lived here for over 40 years. I can tell you at one point, the MBTA actually had a bus stop that was right in front of Papa John's. It's now moved, as you noted. It's about 450 feet from 535. But I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect one of the reasons why they moved is because of the car accidents that happened there. But that movement of the bus stop has not stopped the car accidents. And as I said, there was just one there this past Saturday where 3 cars were involved. The amount of traffic that a cannabis store will bring in is only going to add to that danger. And to subject us as residents in this area to have to worry about that, there's a crosswalk right there at that corner, on the corner of Fairbanks and Washington Street, where people cross, come and go. And as I said, there's already car accidents there. There's a safety issue. We have 3 schools in the neighborhood. There are buses, there are children that are walking, there are people with carriages, baby carriages. There are, as you said, people riding bicycles. So I'm concerned as a resident here, not only about the traffic and the parking, but I'm concerned about the increase of traffic, even if it's only a small number. The increase that it brings is enough that, again, we had a car accident there just on Saturday, and I don't know if your study included how many car accidents there are. So I'm worried about the danger of bringing in a business that is going to have, even if it's pedestrians who could possibly be hurt or injured. And of note, when one of the pictures that you showed at the beginning, you talk about the parking and you'll make sure that people park legally. In one of your pictures, there's a car that's parked right in front of the fire hydrant in front of the building there, which is something so you automatically lose a space right in front of your building because you have a fire hydrant there. So, again, I don't want to hold up this meeting. I'm sure there are other people that want to speak, but I'm really, really concerned about the danger that an increase of people that a cannabis store will bring, whether it's pedestrians or traffic, whether it's by bicycle. We contend with this every day, and it's not fair to us as residents here that we have to worry even more about someone getting hurt. And I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. All right. Barbara, if you could just lower your hand too, that'd be fantastic. Farah, I'm going to unmute you now. Would you like to go ahead?
Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Conor. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm actually in opposition of this proposal for a variety of reasons. One is the traffic issue that people have talked. I was actually a little bit surprised about hearing you saying, okay, you're going to have employees parking in the back of the building, but also you're going to have delivery trucks parking there. Well, there's no way delivery truck could actually go into that little space in there with other people parking in there. So delivery trucks, that's been actually an incredible problem in Brighton always, right? Delivery truck, like around Washington Street, stopping there and blocking people's way to get in. It's like creating incredibly dangerous situation there for people that are driving or people that are walking or trying to cross the street, like blocking people's view. So your delivery truck's going to add to that, and you're not going to be able to drive, have the delivery truck in the back. And another thing that I'm actually surprised, like how responsible are you that you have this building, you bought this building, but the building already looks so unpresentable. If you wanted to to make us convinced that you are going to be a responsible people in a community, how could you have the building looking so unpresentable, making the neighborhood look so trashy in a way, with those windows, with the things hanging from those windows. And we actually have incredible, and also like the third thing, I'm going to make this short because I know there's not a lot of time, but the third thing is about your traffic research that you did. We all lived here for years. I lived here more than 20 years. People just talk, they lived 30, 40 years. So we have combined experience of living here for years and years and years. It's not just a day or two of like doing study in the neighborhood. Today, I was walking down the neighborhood. I noticed 30 people from outside Boston with license plates outside Massachusetts parking on Langley Road. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So your joint is going to actually add to that traffic and add to that parking. I'm a senior person. I go shopping and I come back. I always find hard time to find parking close to our house because of parking issues. And your joint is going to add to parking problem. And plus, you guys are going to be there in a neighborhood where it's residential. It's not a commercial place. For having this huge property in there to be making it into a doping place. And there are kids that live in the neighborhood. There are YMCA right down the road. There's schools everywhere. I'm really concerned about that. And I'm just actually, I had sent a letter to the cannabis board, and I'm just telling you, we love you guys personally, but we do not want your business. Why don't you open up a food co-op in there where people can walk into your co-op and buy very affordable, good quality food? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. All right. Go with Ken. I'm gonna mute you in 1 second. Ken Krasko, you're unmuted now. If you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Connor. Question for Kobe. I heard the first presentation and I was concerned about the number of employees, and I want that number to be verified compared to what we heard during the last presentation. But also, and then as the second thing, I'd like to know, it sounds a little vague, but what's the total number of cars which will be off-site or off the public street, and assuming these are employees that work there during the day? And because what I'm trying to get at is that at 9 o'clock at night, when the workers are leaving, there's a little competition that's going to be going on with local residents who may have not found a parking place close to their home on Fairbanks Street. And I'd like to know what the net number of people will be that are out there scrambling around trying to find a place to park.
So I think that to answer your question, and I know that we're looking at roughly, I think the number we landed on is roughly 10 people per shift, and that's on the high side. And comparatively speaking, I think that in Grove Hall and Dorchester, we're a little higher, but in terms of car utilization, we have off-street parking in Dorchester. We have a parking lot, and at any given time, we only have no more than 3 cars or 3 employees that actually drive to work. In this day and age in the retail business, if you have employees, having a car is a luxury. Boston is a very walkable city. So a lot of employees either use ride sharing programs or take the T. It's not necessarily normal for our staff to have a car. So it's somewhere around a third of our employees that actually drive.
Okay, and what's the total number of off-street parking that you have between the different areas you indicated, the grass area that's behind the,
Yeah, so that's actually a driveway that's grown over, and we can fit 2 cars in there, and then we have the ability for 7 cars in the satellite lot.
7?
Correct.
Right.
So you have a total of 9. Okay, well that's not so bad.
Nope, it's not.
That's
Thank you, Ken.
those were my main concerns. I do appreciate the comment that the previous woman made about the traffic study being done on December 16th. And I'd like to chime in with that also, that all the students were out of town. That was not the most auspicious calendar date to pick for. So I'd be suspicious about anything that came out of that kind of analysis. And I think that there was a general assessment that that Jeff made, that cannabis would have less of an impact overall. I don't think that can possibly be true, because I went to the cleaners for 20 years because I live right on Fairbanks, and it was a very quiet place. There were seldom people there. So I think the amount of activity that this shop will generate, I think it's going to be far greater, and I think I would just like to see more work done on the traffic when I think it'd be more accurate and realistic assessment during times when the students are present.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Ken. We'll go to Julie Kenny. Julie, if you'd like to go ahead, I just unmuted you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, Kobe. You did send an email out and I did reply back to you. And it, I pretty much stated that I honestly didn't think that you were going to be able to sort of fix all of the concerns that were mentioned at the first meeting. I do appreciate you paid for, a traffic study. A lot of these numbers that were, kind of being thrown around seem like they're guesses more than actual data. I, have lived here pretty much all my life too. I come by that corner every night when I come home from work. I do drive to work every day. And there's always somebody, whether it is the, Papa John's delivery man who's trying to park and, blocking the entire street of traffic while he's trying to pull into a parking space, or the traffic study didn't mention, the 18-wheelers that pull up there to deliver, and they also double park and block the entire lane of traffic. You also didn't mention, I believe there's a dumpster in the back of Swan Cleaners right now. Is that going to stay? And will that be your, sort of where your trash will be, and you'll need a trash truck to come in and empty that dumpster periodically? Kobe, I guess that question would be for you.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with the back, and I don't want to speak incorrectly, but I don't think that there's a dumpster out back right now. I think just the way this precarious to try and get a trash truck back there. So I think that, yes, the site is a large site, but we wouldn't necessarily be using it all for a retail operation. In fact, there's a surplus of space, so much so that we could probably store most of our trash would just be paper inside until it's trash day, and then we could, wheel it out. But we do not generate the type of debris that should warrant a dumpster. And I don't think there's one there. I could check the pictures that I have, but I don't think there's one there.
Okay, that's good to know, because I was gonna say, it's gonna be kind of hard to use those 2 spaces in the back if you're gonna have to leave it open for dumpsters on specific days and things like that and a truck to try to come in and out of there.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah. I mean, my main concern is the safety of the site itself. Like one of the other callers had mentioned, it's a really dangerous corner, and with 3 or 4 streets all merging into that one area, Fairbanks, Langley Road, Graymere, it just it just is really, really dangerous. And another thing that your traffic study didn't mention is that in the wintertime, when we have, the city declares emergencies, there is no parking on Washington Street. So all of your customers would have to use side streets parking, during a snow emergency in order to get to your business. And I'm not sure if some of those side streets that you mentioned that, people would be, possibly walking from or parking and walking from, if those do have resident parking or not. I know our street does not. So we would be particularly affected by any off-street parking that people, coming to the site would be looking for parking. They could, in theory, use our street as that. In the winter, when the snow plows do not plow properly, we already have trucks and cars sort of blocking the end of our street. They park over the sidewalk. It makes it really dangerous. You can't see as you're coming out. It's really like a blind, street, especially, again, like I said, when those 18-wheelers are parking, double parking, or the buses, when the buses stop and you have cars trying to, pass the bus and coming into oncoming traffic. And then also the size of the business itself. You said 10 people per shift, and I think before you said it was 3 shifts.
No, no. Again, we're scaling back the hours. So, we have a crew that comes in 8 a.m. and they start opening up, but that's more of a skeleton crew. And then our peak is, we have the bulk of our staff on second shift, which would be the closing shift. So it's maybe a shift and a half.
Okay, so you're thinking 15 employees?
No, so again, it's the staffing is kind of like the parking. It's usually, at the height, it would be 10 people.
Okay, so can you give me an estimate of like your total employees that you think will be at this location?
That's a little more of a challenge. Total employees, Kevin, what do you
Yeah, let me take this one. Just so I understand the question correctly, are you asking how many employees will we have in total, or how many will be occupying the space at one time?
Over the course of the day, how many employees will be at that location?
So at one given time, the total number will be 10.
And there's no crossover between shifts. So one shift's leaving, the other shift is coming in. There's no crossover.
So there is crossover, but again, like at one given time, there will be an exit. There will be a group of folks exiting and another group of folks coming. So like for 10 to 15 minutes, there could be 16 and 20 people who are like crossing over.
Okay, so approximately 20 employees. So the dry cleaners that was there had maybe 2 employees on site at most times. And then the traffic coming and going from that business was never any more than 2 to 3 customers in the building itself at any given time. This is a much larger business than what was there before. It's going to be way more active. And on the prior meeting, you mentioned that you didn't want to utilize the 2 parking spaces behind the building because of safety reasons. Is that safety no longer a concern, that you're now going to allow employees to park there?
I think that more so what we do in Dorchester is that we have off-street parking just for staff. And so with that, we don't have any customer parking at either. We wouldn't have any customer parking at Brighton. And so we could have staff only parking in Brighton and have a gate that opens and closes behind, the car, so that it's a secure location. So we could maintain parking and safety at the same time.
Okay, so it's still going to be gated off.
Correct.
The driveway. Okay. So the person pulling in or coming in is going to have to stop in the middle of the street and open that gate, and then go
We're
in.
going to have security staff out front so they can coordinate with the security staff to, open and close the gate.
Okay, but that would be a delay of that car, like waiting for that to happen.
Potentially.
Yeah, and blocking a one-way street with one lane of traffic.
Can I just say on that, this is Mike Ross, working with the team, the attorney. The whole point of getting employees parking back there was because it's the same employee day after day in a routine. So they understand how to get in and out easily, safely, and quickly, and not put customers back there who, could be the first time they've ever been there. And they, where do I go? How do I park? And that could be a disaster. So we just think it made a lot of sense. It took everyone off the street in terms of anyone who might bring a car for employees. And then deliveries is the same thing. We have a place for a car to pull up, and it'll be secure, and it'll be on our property. And so for all those reasons, we just think it will help facilitate it. So these are people who we're not adding net new parking to the neighborhood. We're putting them into these off-street parkings. That was the whole theory behind that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
to that point, Mike, just to highlight that point, we can actually synchronize how that process works for staff, where, we're calling the person who's outside in advance, asking them to open the gate so that there is no delay or blocking of the one-way street.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, and then just the one other thing is, again, the security of the safety of the location. A month or two ago, there was an accident there. I don't know if it was a pedestrian that got hit or what happened, but there was ambulances and police and all sorts of emergency vehicle, traffic right at that intersection. So again, I don't know if the traffic study looked at that at all. The amount of accidents and things like that do happen at that particular location. It's extremely, extremely busy. And I do oppose this, Conor, and it's really the safety of the location itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. All right. Up next, we'll go to Margaret Lindquist. Just unmuted you there, Margaret, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for the presentation. I own a property in the area, and I as well oppose this business. And frankly, I just don't think it's a very good place for you all to be. As stated many, many times this evening, it is a nightmare with the traffic. And as pointed out, the traffic study was done without the students being there. Boston College is not far from there up Lake Street. Plus, on the snow days, the parking is terrible there. Anybody that's tried to shovel the sidewalks can attest to that. And also Tuesdays in the area, there's every Tuesday there's street sweeping, which means that you can only park on one side of some of the streets. So it really is extremely congested. I just think that, there's a fire hydrant in front that will eat up parking, plus you need clearance for the fire hydrant. It's not just one space, it's probably more like 2 spaces are gone. 4,000 square foot building is enormous with 10 to, up to 10 employees. I'm not sure if the security staff is counted in that 10 people, and that could bring it up to possibly 12 employees. And also to point out the timing of the traffic study, right before Christmas, you had, people still, that was the peak of COVID, and a lot of people moved back with their parents. It's a very young, it can be a young population. And frankly, I have tenants and a lot of them, moved back with their parents during that time, and they took their cars with them. So I think the traffic study was done in a very, very poor time, considering Christmas, COVID, and the students gone. I think that it really is just a terrible location for you all to make any money on. I think it's going to be an absolute nightmare with the parking. I have to go and shovel, because City of Boston requires it, and I can barely find a spot on the street where my building is. Plus, if I have repairs, you have to, not only allow for the residents in those Fairbanks, Turner, all those streets in there, but also workmen to be able to come and, work on a property, all kinds of things, emergency vehicles. I had a terrible problem with a sewer issue. I had, I had, it was the person could barely find parking as it is in the evening. So I just strongly oppose this. I just don't think it's a very good location for you, because I think it's going to be way too much double parking and people moving in and out, a very, very dangerous situation here. And I strongly oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Connor,
Please,
can I just
folks,
really quickly respond if I could on the location point, because it's come up a few times. I just want to make sure everyone knows about the location issue. There is a reason why, I mean, put this proposal aside for a second, there is a reason why this area keeps getting proposals. Yes, twice from Kobe, but there have been others, in Brighton Square, and there will continue to be proposals for this area. And that's because it's currently zoned for cannabis, for a conditional use permit. All commercial locations are. This is a neighborhood shopping district, I believe. But it's commercial, so it's a conditional use permit. The other issue is that there's once one of these is established anywhere in the city, there's a half-mile buffer that goes around it. So if you want to try to get into that half-mile buffer, now you need a variance to get in there. Much harder legal burden for the applicant. Here in this part, again, in this part of Brighton, heading up towards Oak Square, 535 Washington, heading up towards Brighton Center, there are no cited locations. It's like a free half mile. It's a free mile, if you will. So people are looking across the city of Boston. They're scratching their heads. They're saying, where is there still room to put one of these things? And I think that's why you're continuing to see applications come in for this general area of the city of Boston. Our argument is that Kobe's done it before. He's a known commodity. He currently operates one, and he's the person versus the person you don't know. And while it is possible to deny these, I would suspect that they would continue to come proposing, and I think that I just want to try to give that background for people who might be seeing this for the first time, to give you a little context. Thanks.
thank you, Mike. All right, Jeff, I see your hand is unraised. Just unmuted you.
Yep. So I think I'm pretty clearly in the minority here. I am not opposed. I've lived here about 3.5 years now. Quite honestly, I think anyone willing to sink money into our neighborhood is a good thing at this point. We've had a number of restaurants that flat out can't survive. And quite honestly, I live in the city because I enjoy being able to walk to restaurants and stores, and seeing that disappear in our neighborhood, I think is worse to me. So I'd say I have empathy for a lot of people, right? Parking in the neighborhood can be pretty tight. I've complained to Conor myself countless times, quite honestly. But the reality is we live in the city, and I feel like that comes along with it. So I don't know what the other options are, quite honestly. Like, if it's not this company, it's a restaurant. If another restaurant wants to open up in this neighborhood, or the complete opposite, which is even worse to me, would be it gets knocked down and a big building goes in there. Quite honestly, that just takes away. I didn't move to a residential area to live in the suburbs. I want to live in the city. I want this traffic around us. I want to be able to bike to all these locations. Figured I would at least express some support for the company, because again, I think it's better than a lot of our alternatives.
Appreciate it,
Thank you,
Jeff.
Jeff. All right, so a lot of hands raised. Robert Bonner. Robert, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Robert Bonner. I've lived in Oak Square for the last 49 years. I'd like to speak with Kobe first. Kobe, you've got some safety issues in that building. The front panel glass, it's a half-inch thick sheet of glass. It's probably 10 feet high by 8 feet wide. It's been broken out. There's about a square foot of jagged glass down about the height that a child walking by would stick their arm into and end up with a laceration. Can you please get some plywood or something to cover that thing up before someone gets badly hurt?
We'll take care of that this week.
Good. The second issue, Kobe, is there was no attempt to remove snow from the sidewalks around that building during the biggest storm. It went on for days. There were 311 tickets hanging on the front of the building. Can you please arrange with some snow removal company so that you can clean your sidewalks within the amount of time that you're the owner of the building, right?
Correct.
Okay, so can you arrange for a snow removal company to get the snow off the sidewalk as the city requires within whatever it is?
Absolutely.
48. Thank you. That's great. As far as the overall proposal to put a cannabis store there, I agree with everyone else. The numbers that were used for modeling are absurd. All you need to do is drive down there and try to find parking to run in and pick up a sandwich at Ziggy's, or go to the barbershop or something. To suggest that there are typically 35 open parking spaces at 6 o'clock down there is crazy. I'm sympathetic to the fact that there are people who would like to have a cannabis store in the neighborhood, but this is simply not the place for a store that's going to do that volume of business, no matter what they're selling. So for that reason, I oppose the proposal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Noted. Thank you, Robert. Folks, just a reminder, please lower your hands after you've been called on. It makes my job a lot easier. Leanne, Brandon?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm a longtime resident of over 40 years on Langley Road. And just a couple of comments about having been a customer of Swan Laundry. I don't think I ever saw more than 2 people in there at a time. It was just very, I'm not sure how they stayed in business all those years, but anyway, it was, there's no way it could compare to the kind of volume that I think you're looking at. I should preface this by saying I'm not in favor of the establishment. But I'd also like to ask you about your employee parking. Are you talking about putting your employee parking right alongside the building in that fenced in space? Is that what you were saying?
We are talking about using that space for employee parking, correct? For limited, for 2 cars.
Right, but if you have 10 employees and maybe 6 of them, have cars, where do the rest of your employees park?
So we have secured additional off-street parking off Fairbank Street. There's a small lot, a privately owned lot that we're working with the owner on.
Okay, so my question about that is, I assume you're leasing that. Should that in a year, the owner of that decide, oh gee, we really don't like these folks parking here. Your lease is up, all of a sudden you're back to having your people, just your people, back on the street again. So that would be a concern, because there's no guarantees when you're leasing or renting space from someone else. So that would be a big concern. But one of the things I noticed on the parking survey was that Langley Road wasn't included on the fact that there are parking spaces there. And so I was sort of surprised, because if I were a customer coming to frequent your store, the first thing I would do would be start circling around, because Langley Road's sort of like a half circle. I would start circling around Langley Road, Washington Street, Langley Road, Washington Street. That's the most sensible way that I would look for parking. And Langley Road, as I don't know, I guess your people didn't look at Langley Road, but Langley Road is a disaster at mostly, particularly your prime time. The other night I came home at 4:30 and I couldn't find a parking space. I had to park 2 blocks away and walk on the ice, it was icy and all that. So I'm not sure how your parking folks sort of are looking at reality. I mean, I can see you picking out some spots for your customers to park in, but that doesn't mean that your customers are going to park in those spaces. What they're going to do is circle around Langley Road and Fairbanks and all of that. And I think that's a pretty serious problem. Another issue that I have is you mentioned that you have 200 letters of support. I would be curious to know how many of those were within, you know, a 2 or 3 block radius of people who are permanent residents who live here. I mean, we're the ones who have to deal with this kind of an issue of parking and congestion. So that's a very big concern. You know, talking about 200 letters of support, I could get 200 letters of support to support something no matter what. But they wouldn't necessarily be from, you know, a 2 or 3 block radius that's going to be impacted by this. So again, not having secure, I mean, even if you have secured parking for employees, but not permanent, it doesn't belong to you, is a problem. The problem of impact of parking on all the streets around here. And again, your parking survey, I think, is questionable. Also, the number of people per hour, 13 vehicles an hour, 25 trips per hour. The other thing I'd like to point out is bicycles. I think I've seen 2 bicycles maybe a day on Washington Street. People around here don't use bicycles very much. I'm not sure what your traffic people were able to count, but anytime it's snowy or in the wintertime, people aren't riding bicycles anyway. So anyway, I just think this is extremely problematic and the impact on the neighborhood is extreme. I wish you well, and I hope you find some other place to have your business that's more welcoming and more accessible, because this certainly is not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, going down the line, we'll go Deborah Vellante.
Am I on?
Yep, we can hear you now, Deborah. Go ahead.
Yes, Deborah Valianti. And I actually want to thank Jeff for the traffic study, because you had the little yellow lines going up Washington, and then they were on Oak Square Ave, and they stopped just before my house. But from that traffic study, I did get to see my red roof, which is about the only red roof in the neighborhood. However, just by looking at that, you stopped as if people are not going to park on Oak Square Ave, which, because I am directly behind a whole phalanx of businesses on Washington, I know that people are going to be parking further than you showed, and they will definitely be on Oak Square Ave. And often they're parked right in front of my driveway and my neighbors' driveways. And this is a serious issue. I've lived here for 35 years, so I have the experience of, like Bill is right next to your building. I am abutting businesses right on Washington. And so I know what the issues are of busy businesses. And certainly with 12 hours, which was fairly busy, but before that, there were several restaurants on the corner that were much busier. And there was constant coming and going with cars. At that time, there were taxis. And it was really a nightmare. So we've already iterated all of these problems last year at the meeting. And we had some clear objections. And nothing really has changed other than it's a year later. And as Robert pointed out, the building is degrading at this point. If you are good owners and responsible neighbors, you will probably take a look around the corner and see all the graffiti that has appeared on the walls. We'd appreciate it if somebody would paint over that. We've been told by the city that graffiti on private businesses will not be taken care of by the city. It needs to be taken care of by the owners of the properties. And having lived on Oak Square Ave for 35 years, I know exactly where that parking lot that you're talking about is. It's directly behind the apartment complex that's across the street from me. You cannot chain that little road, so you cannot really supervise the access to that parking. And as Leanne said, since you don't own it, it might be abruptly taken from you. And it's a dirt lot, not particularly suitable. So I've already, again, voiced my objections to the Cannabis Board, sent a letter in, and this is getting really difficult and tiresome for us, that we have to continue to fight this issue. I will reiterate what other people have said. I knew Swan Cleaners very, very well. I was a customer. I walked with my clothing around the corner to bring it. Never more than 1 or 2 people in there. 1 employee most of the time. And this is just too large a use for our neighborhood. So I respectfully say that I'm continuing to be opposed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Zachary, we'll go to you next. Zachary Pinter.
All right, thank you, fellas. I really appreciate the presentation. Kevin, Kobe, I love what you guys are doing. You know, I think I'll start off by saying I'm in favor. I've lived here for just, you know, not as long as some of the other residents, but I have an overall feel for the city and the corner. And I think the disdain for cars is felt, you know. I definitely agree. Parking is tough for people, and I understand that, but it comes with a lot of lack of support for public transit, which you guys constantly, you know, mentioned throughout the presentation. And you said only a third of your employees actually use cars. Like, I'm sure there's a very accessible road, so I'm sure only so many of the customers will use cars. So I think, you know, maybe we can prop up public transit a bit more than just hating on cars, because that seems like a good way to move in the future. But, you know, I think you guys are really trying to do good for the community, and I want you to know that it's recognized. And yeah, I guess that's really all I had to say. I appreciate the time, fellas.
Zachary, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. All right, we'll go next to Dave M. Dave?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having this presentation and involving the community. I also want to say that I do appreciate entrepreneurs, and I am always, you know, I'm a lifelong Brighton resident, lived in Brighton for over 40 years. I do appreciate new, vibrant business opportunities. But I do also want to voice that I am opposed to this type of business. With all due respect to, I believe it was his name, Jeff, who is not in opposition to this type of establishment.
Dave, please keep it just focused on either myself or the applicant. I don't.
Okay. I am also opposed to this type of establishment. The traffic study that was conducted and mentioned in this presentation, I believe is inaccurate. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I am very familiar with that area. I know that parking is at a premium there. There is not a lot of parking. As far as the traffic study is concerned, again, in the peak hours of traffic, that is inaccurate as well. I mention that because being someone who works in the area as well and who is intimate with the traffic at all hours of the day, the peak traffic actually occurs, we'll say, early to mid-morning to mid-afternoon. And the reason why I say that is because there are various schools in the area, the Edison School, 2 Mary Lyon schools, the Winship School, that when buses are traveling through Brighton Center, Oak Square, it can get very, very congested. So I'm not really sure how the peak hours were determined, but I can tell you even from this morning that Brighton Center leading into Oak Square was a parking lot. And as I was traveling through, I noticed many buses, both MBTA and school buses, traveling in Brighton Center, and it just adds to the congestion. That's why I'm saying that I believe the peak hours are not, in fact, late hour afternoons. One last thing I just want to mention, because I know other people are going to speak to, I don't want to take up too much of their time. If the Brighton camps and the Horning camps are listening, there's some important things to mention as far as this location. Number one, at 599 Washington Street, I just did a little bit of quick Google measuring today. There is the Youth Development Center there, which is also, I believe, still used for AA meetings, substance abuse meetings. Not really sure if having a cannabis dispensary so close to that is a good idea. There are two major playgrounds within 800 feet, Rogers Park, Hardman Playground, that's used by children all times of year. There's the YMCA, which is actually only 800 feet away from this proposal. Again, very kid-friendly, if you want to put it that way, environment. There's also the child daycare, the community center located in Oak Square, which Little Sprouts is located. I mentioned the Mary Lyons School, which is right down the street. And then there are various other businesses as well. One last thing I want to mention is that, and Conor, I'm not sure if this might be you might have better knowledge of this than myself, that right directly across the street from the proposed cannabis dispensary, there is a proposal for, I'm going to call it a relatively large-scale apartment building that's supposed to be built on the corner of Langley Road and Washington Street. I'm sure that's going to take away a lot of parking as well. But thank you guys again. I want to thank you for having this meeting. Thank you for involving the community. I appreciate it, but I do want to voice again that I am opposed to this type of establishment, again, based on the same concerns that the other residents are stating as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Thank you, Dave. All right. Ed Shuker?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Go right ahead.
Yes, 541 Washington Street, 2 doors down from the project. I have a perspective and a different perspective on the parking. It's in the same vein, but slightly different in that the parking, yes, was done on December 16th when students, a lot of them had gone. Yes, so that's going to skew the numbers. And someone brought up that it was COVID, so some young people had moved back. But I think if you ask the businesses, you'd find that COVID was keeping customers from coming to their businesses and parking on the streets, and a lot of the activity and a lot of the normal parking that's on that street and taking up some of those 33 spaces that they found vacant were not there because a lot of businesses had gone out. And so you have normal trip generating businesses not there anymore because of COVID. And then you have a lot of businesses just struggling. If you ask the businesses along the street, a lot of them are just barely getting by because their regular customers are not wanting to drive and see them. So the numbers that the argument is being made that, hey, there's plenty of parking is based on a one-time visit to the area in the middle of COVID. Wait a year, wait, and then do the study. So the second thing I want to say is that the proponent's arguing that locating this establishment in Oak Square is a good location because, and I quote from their presentation, it will buffer out cannabis establishments from unsuitable locations at the epicenter of 5 schools in Brighton Center. Well, the underlying argument is the recognition that locating marijuana shops near schools where young people are is unsuitable. Okay, I agree with that. But doesn't the very same argument apply to Oak Square being an unsuitable location? Because the shop would be in a predominantly residential neighborhood where a large number of the children who attend those 5 schools live. Thank you.
For point of clarification, I believe that BC is from their calendar. It says that they are in session until December 20th.
Okay.
Hey, just Conor, one quick thing on this. Sometimes people don't realize this, and I think it's worth mentioning. State law requires any community that voted for cannabis to have no fewer than 20% of the number of liquor licenses that they have in the community. So Boston has over 250 licenses. So there's going to be a total of a minimum, a basement of 52, 3, 4 dispensaries. That doesn't mean that when we come into a community to propose something, it has to go there. It does not mean that. I'm not saying that. But what it does mean is that there has to be 54, 55, according to state law, ultimately, eventually, in the city, and that in any city that voted for cannabis, which Boston did. So I think it's worth pointing that out.
Thank you, Mike. Just reading some of the questions and comments out of the Q&A. Barbara asked, what is the recommended number of spots the city requires for this size of business with the number of customers expected? So there isn't a metric that the city requires for number of parking spots. Often with zoning and on the residential side of things, it might be 1.75 if you're adding additional units to a building. That's not the case with these guys. The only violation they had is that marijuana is a conditional use, which triggers this community process. Dimitri, don't worry, I haven't skipped you. I'm just taking a break to acknowledge the Q&As, and I see your hand is raised. I'm going to call on you in a second. So from David, I strongly oppose this business too. As the other resident said, traffic analysis results blow off my mind. The time is not right. Also, just one-time analysis. I've lived here for years. I don't believe he does not agree with the end point of this analysis. Someone else also asked in the chat, Kobe and Kevin, if you guys could share your emails in the chat function, I think a resident would like to reach out to you.
My email is in there. It should be in the chat function.
Yeah, if you don't mind just popping it in one more time. Barbara, I'm in opposition to this proposal as being not viable based on the traffic patterns and the traffic congestion in this densely populated area. Visitors unable to find parking will end up on one-way streets where there's resident parking only. And Emily, I think you also would like to go as well. So let me first read one more in the chat. I know Tony mentioned, there were concerns raised before when City Realty had a proposal to develop this site. If the ground was potentially contaminated from chemicals used at Swan Cleaners, can you comment on that? Is this a site that would require maintenance and cleaning?
So there is some contamination, but if you don't do anything with the building, then it's fine. But if someone wanted to build something, there would be the need for remediation.
And if you wanted to live there, you would, there's a different standard than if you're just operating a business out of there. These issues arise all the time with old laundromats and gas stations and the like, and they're infinitely mitigatable. It just costs a little bit of extra money, and there are requirements that you have to do it in certain circumstances, which of course we would if we had to, but we're not seeing that as an issue here.
Okay, Dimitri, I know you were waiting to be called on. Just unmute you now if you'd like to go ahead. Dimitri? Dimitri, you there? Dimitri, I've just unmuted yourself. But all right, you can circle back. Call in user 617-529. I can't read the rest of the number. Call in user if you'd like to go ahead. 617-529.
Yes, my name is David Callahan. I own the property at 18 Fairbank Street, which actually abuts the driveway into your back parking lot that you're suggesting to use for your employees. And like other people have said, your parking analysis is questionable at the very best. I think you would have gotten better numbers if you used December 25th. It would have looked better for you guys. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, like, between the parking and the number of people coming in, the traffic that's going to be caused, the foot traffic and everything else like that, I have to say I'm opposed to this. I'm opposed to the fact that it's going to bring a lot of, it would bring a lot of people into the neighborhood. The thing is yes, it is zoned for commercial, but as other neighbors have said, it's a unique space because all along that area you have commercial, and then right next door you have residential. So I apologize. I just, and then also the fact that if you're going to have more and more people going in and out of the driveway that my property abuts, I'll be interested to see how many more dents that the fence gets going in. Plus, it's just a very narrow street, and all over all those blocks right there, you're going to be pushing traffic. By bringing everybody in, it's nice to say, oh, people walk 5 feet and stuff like that. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be displacing residents that live there, and you'll be dropping a pedal into a pond, and it will ripple out across many more blocks than you probably estimate for people who are trying to park there for the evening after coming home from work and trying to enjoy their nights. That's all I had to say. I do wish you guys the best of luck. I just don't think this is the place that needs to, for the business you're looking to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Dimitri, we'll go back to you.
Oh, cool. I think I actually fixed it this time. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Dimitri. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I'd just like to preface this by saying I'm supporting them actually moving into the space and renovating and cleaning it up. One big thing, it's a massive eyesore on the community. I think people have said that, and I think the best way to clean it up is to actually get you guys in the space ASAP so that you can actually renovate it. Number one. Number two, concerns over the whole traffic thing. I'm just curious, how does the actual trips that have been estimated, how does that actually compare to your other location? Because that information would tell you quite a bit if it's reasonable, if it's a reasonable traffic estimation. Sorry if I'm talking too fast. And number three, how did you guys actually go about by taking up the getting the measurements for the volume of traffic through that area at any one point? Like, did you actually go out? Because I know there's sometimes people go out there and count cars that pass through an area in a certain amount of time, and then you can estimate that way, or you can use different kinds of stochastic simulations in order to figure out, okay, how many cars pass through a set given area. And also, how does that actually compare to the total amount of volume that is supposed to go through either like this small collector, or sorry, this collector road or small arterial road that Washington Street actually is? Also, one last comment. Hopefully you guys would also go into the medicinal cannabis industry, because we are so close to St. Elizabeth's, and giving patients an additional place in order to access cannabis from would always be a good thing. Does that all make sense?
It does, Dimitri. Thank you. Jeff, can you chime in on methods?
Yeah, so the ITE chip generation that we pointed out also has a code for daily chip generation. So that's where we established that increase in traffic on Washington Street. So I'll just start there. So that gave us a number of about 400 vehicles per day that would be added to Washington Street. And Kobe and I had discussed how that aligns with the amount of business that he has recorded from his other business in Dorchester. So that is kind of what we used to just make sure that what we were presenting was a valid assumption in using the ITE trip generation. In other words, we didn't want the ITE data to present something that was wildly different from what Kobe has experienced from his other store. So I think that's a good point. We do have that information available handy from the other store. as far as the data collection goes, I know, a lot of the commentary has been focused on the parking study and the data collection related to that. I did mention in one of the slides that we looked at the capacity analysis at the Washington Fairbanks Langley intersection in front of the site. So when we collected traffic volumes there, we collected them on October 27th during that the 4 to 6 p.m. peak hour. So as much as the parking study may have been collected in December, the traffic counts themselves were collected in October when, it could be, stand to reason that that's more of an accurate condition than what some other folks have had some concern regarding with the parking. So when we looked at the 11,000 vehicles per day on Washington Street, that's where we determined that number.
Jeff, so you're saying there's 11,000 cars that pass through that area a day?
Yes.
And so what would be the incremental increase based on Pure Oasis?
That increase would be about 4%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. We're coming close to 8 o'clock. I want to squeeze a couple more comments and questions in. So, Salinas Aquino, just unmuted you if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. You also said my name perfectly, by the way, so I appreciate that. At least my first name. But hello, I'm Salinas. I've been living here for a couple of years, and I do live really close to the site. I want to first thank you for the presentation because it was really informative. And I want to say I'm definitely in support. I think that there's already plenty of restaurants here to the point that we saw many of them go out of business. So I don't think that that kind of business would fit in this community. But I do think that a dispensary could fit. If it could be a cannabis dispensary anyway, even if it's not directly from you guys, from Pure Oasis, I'd rather it be a dispensary that is Black owned and values hiring locally and works to offset the disparities historically caused by marijuana, because that's what communities really need and can directly benefit from. And I think a lot of the customers will probably be local as well. I know we're factoring in customers that are driving over, but it's not like there's not other dispensaries that are in driving distance. So I think that you will have a lot of customers be local as well. And I know that other pot shops do limit traffic with online ordering being required or scheduling a time to come into the store. So that is an option to kind of limit the, like, at least not necessarily foot traffic, but at least car traffic. And I think if there can be 3 or more liquor stores between Oak Square and Market Street, I don't see why there can't be a single cannabis dispensary. And yeah, I just want to say that I'll definitely be reaching out to write a letter of support from a resident that's only a few hundred feet away. I can literally see the site out of my window. So I just want to let you know that I appreciate what you guys are doing. I think this is amazing. And yeah, I definitely support.
Awesome, awesome. Our emails are in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Salinas. Emily, I know you wanted to be called on. Find you real quick. I don't think she's with us anymore. Thanks. All right. We have a call-in user 617782. I'm going to unmute you. Call-in user 61. Yep, we can hear you.
Hello, my name is Mike Beats. I live across the street from the proposed location. First of all, I'd like to say I am opposed, but it's not for any reason because it's marijuana. I'm not opposed to marijuana or cannabis or ingesting any other products or smoking of it or anything like that. It's just a bad location. This is a terrible location to have it. And it happens to be the curve in the road right there. It's a safety issue totally. It curves right there, and there's a blind spot. The pot shop is actually going to be in a blind spot where cars come down the street both ways too fast, and there's a crosswalk right there, and several people have almost been killed in the crosswalk, and there's been several fender bender accidents that I've witnessed, and they don't some of these people don't even call the cops on it, so that they don't have a listing because they just exchange papers and move on. The parking test that you guys did, it seems really skewed, parking and traffic skewed to an opening of this shop, because talking about 33 shops being 33 spots being available on Washington Street, especially at your peak time, which, by the way, another caller called in about the peak time being in the AM, and he was 100% correct. And the peak time at night, between 5 and 6, is when all these people who live here are all coming home and taking the spots. The parking, there are no spots parking anywhere. You get the bus stop right across the street from you guys, and a bus stop right down the street on your side. And so, you know, the skewed numbers and everything, you really have. I was listening to the all these calls and listening to this conference in a room full of people, and you guys really lost us when you showed a picture of a car parked right in front of your shop, and so it does not show the fire hydrant that is right there. That car is blocking a fire hydrant, and it looks like it's a parking spot. So people laughed. And then when you said the 33 spots that are all available to park, people started laughing. And when you finally said that it will be not as the traffic won't be as bad as the people who were going to the dry cleaners, I mean, the room erupted. People were laughing their heads off, saying, "Who does this traffic consultation?" Because they don't even know what they're talking about. So anyway, I hate to say it so negatively, but I'm not against pot or anything like that, but we're against it at this location. It's very dangerous on that blind spot, and when the tractor trailer is parked there, that's how someone's going to get killed in that crosswalk right in front of your shop. And we're going to have to say, "I told you so," and we don't want to say, "I told you so." We don't want that to happen at all. The other thing about the testing was when you said the random cars that are just going down the street and they may decide to look in, so they weren't counted. There's no spots for them to stop and park in, those random people driving down the street. There's nowhere to park, so you didn't count those random stop-ins. But anyway, I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike. All right. Will, I see your hand is raised again, so we'll close it out with you. Start with you, we'll close it out with you. Will, go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Again, I'm right next door, and I just want to address one thing that made a big difference to me. Now, you own this building?
Correct.
And how long have you owned it?
Months.
So at the big storm that we had a few weeks ago, that was the only place I saw that was unshoveled. People were struggling to walk in front of your building. I myself went to get food at the Japanese restaurant there. I had to struggle to get through a narrow crack at the curb of snow. It was very dangerous. You couldn't walk on the sidewalk on Fairbanks. You had to walk in the street. And as most of the residents know around here, people turn that corner and they zip around that corner. It was very dangerous. And I took pictures of it. And I'm sorry, with all due respect, this said to me how this might, your attitude toward the neighborhood or how you might run the business. We all hire someone to shovel our snow. It's an obligation in Boston, and there was a ticket on your door. And the fact that we couldn't walk past your building on either side, that said a lot to me right at that point. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. All right, folks, we've heard a lot of feedback tonight. A lot of people were able to comment tonight, which is great. From the mayor's office standpoint, we always want to hear from more residents, so it's good to have a productive meeting like this. This time, these guys do not have a date with the Cannabis Board. If you'd like to find out more information on when that future meeting would be scheduled, or future hearing would be scheduled, feel free to reach out to my office. I already have a pretty lengthy email list of folks who have expressed interest in this project in the past. So if you're not on that list, or you're just attending for the first time, I would encourage you to reach out to the mayor's office. We're going to continue to collect comments and feedback. I know Kobe and Kevin have dropped their emails in the chat function. If you'd like to reach out to them with a specific question or concern, I'm also happy to facilitate too if you missed that email. But at this point, I'm going to hit the end record button and we're going to call it a night.